Hi, my name is Tate Abbott, and today we will be discussing the French Revolution. So to start off, I'm going to give a brief summary of the revolution and then dissect the individual aspects, and then kind of just give an overall summary of the revolution and what it did and its impact. It started in 1789 to about 1799-ish, and it was a total overthrow of the monarchy for an established republic in its stay. This turned out to be a success, yet in the short amount of time, the people who replaced the previous power were instantly at the butcher's blocks themselves, so to speak. And it was a revolution that was fueled by a new ideology coming from a rise in philosophers and their writings. The French people truly wanted change and would stop at nothing to get it. This in turn escalated into the Reign of Terror, in which there was a constant state of fear for everybody's lives and safety. And then as the Reign of Terror itself imploded, a coup led by Napoleon Bonaparte helped him come to power and helped wrap up the revolution in a way that not necessarily ended it, but made it come to fruition. So the beginning itself, I should say, just revolutions in general, not just the French Revolution. So when it comes to the starting of revolutions, I would state that it's the ideas that drove them, and that people have this basic idea and thought process of what society should be like. And this is based off somewhat of past knowledge and also an innate desire and an innate thought process that this is what we deserve and these are the rights and freedoms that we deserve as people. However, there are also writings and philosophers that write down these ideas as well, which might actually fuel the thought process and start the thought process. However, I think people already knew that in their minds and already were aware of the desires that they should have. And then in the case of the French Revolution, to get more focused on that, the French people had a desire for more rights and freedoms, and this can be traced back to the innate desire aspect of this, and the thought process of these people getting their freedom and wanting their freedom can be traced back to the Magna Carta, which eventually led to philosophers such as Voltaire and Rousseau, whom fueled the American Revolution, which in turn led to the thought process of the French people of hope and of change. So that's kind of covering both the innate aspect and the aspect that philosophers did play a part into it and did get the minds of the people going, yet these philosophers already had those ideas built within them. So it's both go hand in hand, yet I would lean more to the innate aspect of people just understanding the rights that they deserve and that they are born with, and their unalienable rights, so to speak. However, in relation to the French Revolution, and in relation to the government that was in place, the historian Roger Chartier states that the people of France despised the kings as people, but still respected the title of the king. So over time, the king, however, lost this view from the people and lost this feeling from the people. And now there were multiple reasons that led to the people losing respect of the crown. However, the main one to focus on, because of the lack of time, is that the king distanced himself from the people in privatizing his crowning ceremony. And the crowning ceremony is a big deal to the French and to the French people. It's something that in America we wouldn't understand because we don't have a king, but the loyalty of the people to the king was so just overwhelming that they desired to be a part of the ceremony. Yet when he privatized that, people were furious and enraged. And so that distaste arose in people's mouths. And so along with the privatizing and the things that the king had been doing to the people also had this overwhelming desire for more freedoms and more rights. And there was this mass buildup of all these issues that led to the beheading of King Louis XVI and the start of the Reign of Terror. So the Reign of Terror itself lasted from 1793 to 1794 and was infamously known for the mass executions from the guillotine, which King Louis XVI was executed at, along with Marie Antoinette, or Marie Antoinette, and a few other famous people. But the reason there's so many historians put an emphasis on the Reign of Terror is because of how drastic it made this revolution in comparison to others. So, for example, prior to this revolution, the people of America themselves had successfully had their own, and that led to the freedom from oppression, whereas the French Revolution seemed to be causing even more oppression and fear amongst people. And so it went from a national pride thing to a power-hungry group of people who did not actually want freedom but wanted to oppress others underneath them. So it was a revolution completely unique in its own in that aspect. And on top of that, it made sure that no one was safe. So people from all walks of life were executed on a daily basis. Even Maximilien Robespierre himself, which was the man behind the mask of the Reign of Terror, was executed without trial. So the man in charge of everything saw his life vanish in an instant. And this man, however, not only did he just lose his life in an instant, this man who was in charge of the Reign of Terror was a man who stated himself that he wanted to fulfill the destiny of man, realize the promise of philosophy, and to acquit crime and tyranny, yet he himself became corrupt. So like I said earlier, people had an innate desire of freedom and of rights, and philosophers had written all these desires down, and the people despised kings and tyranny and the corrupt government, yet the man who was there to save the people became everything that the French Revolution was trying to get rid of. So that's the main thing to take away from that, is that Robespierre himself was equally at fault, and the people themselves were equally corrupt as the government they were trying to replace. And so two memoirs from this era describe perfectly what the people felt. So it comes from Jacques-Louis Menetra, I think is how you say his name, but he has a quote where he says, "The people rushed to arms and supported those who called themselves the fathers of the people." So this describes perfectly how a Parisian who was witnessing and feeling an overload of emotions was reacting to the change in his country. It seems as if being a townsperson would have been exciting and would have been a sense of hope and pride within them, and it would have been an overflow of these feelings. And how this nationalistic country that was on the rise and the people were on a rise instantly changed to horror and fear. Another quote is, "During this time, terror hovered over France, and particularly in Paris, where everyone lived not only in the greatest penury, but also of horror in every kind." So it was this feeling amongst the people that drastically changed from joy and hope to terror and emptiness. So overall, as a townsperson, life would have been a process of constantly looking over one's shoulder to see if they were safe and to see if their next door neighbor was conspiring to have them murdered for whatever reason, whatever it may have been. That was the Reign of Terror. So this thought process of pure freedom and rights and inalienable rights, which is an American term but applies here, and as these people changed their government, the government that they were changing into was more evil towards them than the government that was already in place. And so out of all of this rose Napoleon Bonaparte, who came to power through his coup that he led. And throughout his rise to power, historians argue that he himself was actually the one who fulfilled the revolutionary ideology that was thrown around by people such as Robespierre. So he managed to encourage the success and growth of religious tolerance and secular education. So these two areas are deemed, or were deemed, as extremely important to the revolutionary people of France. These were two of their main goals and thought processes. And a part of this, it was freedom and intellectual growth that they desired from the French Revolution. So Napoleon himself actually encouraged the growth of citizens in society and their ability to rise to different class levels than what they were born in. And a quote from a historian is, "Nevertheless, Napoleon preserved, first off, strengthened, second, and then spread to other lands many of the revolution's reforms. So he himself encouraged the freedom of the people of France and their rights as citizens as he became and reigned as Emperor of France. So I would say, to sum it all up, Napoleon not only, or not that Napoleon ended the French Revolution, but however, his first year as Emperor of France summed up the French Revolution as a success. So it ended, yet also began with Napoleon. And so it's a weird transitional phase, I guess you could say, of Napoleon fully captured and used, or when Napoleon came to power, it also brought about a fruition of the French Revolution, is the best way to say it. And that the French Revolution came to fruition as Napoleon was Emperor of France. So to sum it up, many historians have multiple views as to the French Revolution and what it did for the world. It came at a time where all throughout the Atlantic theater, multiple countries and people groups were revolting towards the rulers who sat over them. Eventually making its way to Europe and to the people of France, it took a turn that was never seen beforehand. And so this uniquely different revolution was extremely violent and bloody, and saw multiple fights for power with people rising and falling within days. So some see this revolution as extremely beneficial, while others see it as something that hindered the Enlightenment period itself. However, I believe it was a success in allowing allowing the powerful to be free, yet the people themselves went through more terror than they had ever dreamed beforehand, or not dreamed, but had ever foreseen beforehand. So in that aspect, it was a failure, and more of a failure than a success in giving people their rights. However, through Napoleon and towards the end of the revolution, people actually did get their rights, and everything came to fruition, and they got what they desired. So in the long run, it was a success. However, it took a long way to get there, and there was a lot that went into it before they got to the revolution period of change and of being where they desired to be. So started, it's terrible, and then it was good. And so if you skip all this and just do this part, it was a great revolution in that aspect. So, because overall it gave the people of France and the citizens of France the rights that they had desired. So that's basically the French Revolution in a nutshell, and this is really long, but yeah, thank you.